إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا ومن يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. All the praise and glorification is due to Allah alone. We seek Allah's help and forgiveness. We seek refuge with Allah from any evil that might be in our soul and our bad deeds. Whom Allah guides will never be led astray, and whoever Allah leads astray, no one can guide. I bear witness that there is no God, there is no deity but Allah Azza wa Jal, the exalted one who has no partner. I bear witness to the fact that Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is Allah's final servant and messenger. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha haqqa tuqatihi wa la tamutunna illa wa antum muslimun. O you who have believed in Allah, fear Allah as Allah alone should be feared, and do not die except as Muslims in submission to Allah. Ya ayyuhan nas uttaqu rabbakum alladhi khalaqakum min nafsin wahida وخلق منها زوجها وبعث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. O people, be dutiful to your Lord who created you from one soul and created from it its mate and dispersed from both many men and women. And fear Allah through whom you demand mutual rights, and revere the wombs that bore you. Indeed, Allah is ever over you, al-Raqib, and observer. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqaha. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullaha wa qulu qawlan sadida yuslih lakum a'malikum wa yaghfir lakum dhunubakum wa may yuti' Allaha rasuluhu faqad faza fawzan 'azima. O you who have believed in and fear Allah, speak words of appropriate justice. Allah will then amend for you your deeds and forgive you your sins. Whoever obeys Allah and Allah's messenger has attained the most excellent attainment. Today, I wanted to talk to you about a subject that I often get asked about. The subject is called Tasweer in Arabic. In the realm of artistic expression, there are few topics that ignite as much intrigue and debate as the concept of Tasweer in Islamic jurisprudence, in Islamic law. So just to simplify this so that you're not wondering what I'm talking about, we're talking about pictures, artwork here. Imagine for a moment the creative impulse that drives an artist to bring life to a canvas, to sculpt a figure from stone, or to capture the world through the lens of a camera. How are they different? So I'm going to present various arguments today, and I do not want you to look for the argument that would suit your needs. I want you to try to listen to what is said in the Quran and what is said in the Sunnah, and make up your mind what is the best fatwa. And I will even give you a scholarly fatwa that I deem by Allah is a little questionable, but I want you to make up your mind. These acts of making art are deeply embedded in human nature. So when we look at the archaeological findings, we see that the earliest of so-called peoples, tribes, nations, civilizations drew their artwork. There were stick figures, but many other kinds of artwork, but there throughout the history of the world, people have involved themselves in art. So what is okay and what isn't? Because, you know, just to throw this out there, artwork that's left behind leaves us, or leaves those tribal people, with a living legacy of their life. There's much history that we might not know had it not been for hieroglyphics and various things that have been found. Now, let's take that up another notch. I always try to teach whatever I'm teaching about. I try to think about how does this apply to the world in which we live? How can I make this applicable to my world? So let's add to that the selfie culture, where literally I've seen people trip because they were doing selfies. I've seen people fall. I've seen people taking risky selfies where they drop their cameras. And I'm sure that nobody in this room probably has ever experienced that. But I think we have to, again, we want to examine things in context of the modern world. And as a result of that, I think it makes this class important, fundamental, actually. Ahadith are a proof, not just an opinion. So I want to remind you of that as we are going through this class today, to remember that ahadith are the secondary form of proofs in Islam, with the Quran being the first. So ahadith are a proof, they're a sign, they're evidence, not just opinions. So reserve your decision about what constitutes Tasweer until the end of this class. Allah knows best. Now, adding to that the rich tapestry of Islamic tradition, this very act of making images of animate beings, and let me underline animate beings, let me highlight that and perhaps make it bold, raises profound theological questions. So I'm going to stir your thought patterns for a moment, inshallah. And I want to stir your heart to look inside your heart for the intellect of Islam that has been stored in that library, in that fortress. So how do we as humans navigate the fine line between artistic expression and the boundaries set by divine law? We have some very, very so-called, in the modern world, creative people in the Islamic family. Many of our members are very so-called artistic. So today we delve into the classical definition of Tasweer, exploring its implications, its prohibitions, and the wisdom that underpins this delicate balance between expressivity and the preservation of Tawheed, the oneness of Allah. And I'm sure some of you might be saying this has to do with Tawheed, the oneness of Allah. And yes, it does, a lot. And you will see that, inshallah, as we go through this class. Now, what makes it challenging is that the word Tasweer had a very specific connotation in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, and it referred to sculpting. So if you remember, one of our great prophets' father was actually an idol maker, a sculptor of idols. And so we're going to look at this balance, inshallah. I often get asked this question: will the angels not enter my home if I have pictures in it? Well, if we think about how we visit the sick, 70,000 angels come in the morning and 70,000 come if we go back in the evening. If we think that we have an angel on our right side and our left side, and if we actually look into our article of faith that believe in the angels, and we have knowledge of the angels, we will understand how important and the important role that they play in our life. So drawing figures was part of Tasweer at the time, and also weaving or sewing full figures into a piece of fabric. It's called a dobby in the modern world when something is raised up in a fabric, but this would be a dobby that has an animal. So if you think about the Polo brand, there's a horse on there. So there are many Muslims that will not wear those shirts because of the horse on there. Now, this may come as a surprise, but I actually got this off of a very short couple of minute video with Dr. I.S.L.A.M, who I so respect for his knowledge. And he said that photography did not have the full equivalent. So it's sort of like not apples to apples when you're talking about Tasweer. And actually that goes to the ruling of photographs as a whole. And we'll talk about why I said that a little later on in the class, inshallah. So is photography something which actually is a capturing of the reflection of light, the same as drawing something in its totality or hanging or giving that an honorable place in your home? So I know when I grew up, it was very customary over a mantle, a fireplace, to have the matriarch of the family. And everybody would sort of admire and revere this matriarch when they came by. Always sort of gave me the sort of feeling like a shrine to this person. It was a little over the top. And, be like huge. So a lot of the scholars in the modern world say, no, it is not the same. Okay. And there are some lessons and elements I deem by Allah that we can take from that. So again, if you place an enlarged picture of a human and put it up in your home where it's sort of given too much sanctity, where that person is reverenced, and reverence is only due to Allah, then it would probably be problematic. Okay. According to Dr. Omar Suleiman, having photography pictures in the home as photography is permissible, and it does not remove blessings from a home if we don't place it in a place giving it too much honor and sanctity to the point of it serving as a sculpture or something else analogous to what the Prophet ﷺ was speaking about in the ahadith prohibiting tasweer. And there are 21 ahadith. And there is a great book, and interestingly enough, I was going to recommend it, and I don't know what I've done with it. That's really interesting. Let me just quickly look over here. All right. Anyway, if you were to Google Tasweer, that book would come up for you. That is really strange because I was just reading it yesterday. Okay. So this is why this is actually so scary, by the way. It is recorded in 2 Sahih. So what do we mean by that? Sahih Ahadith are Sahih Muslim and Sahih Bukhari. Both of them. And this is what it says. The most severely punished people on the day of judgment will be the picture makers. So if you don't understand the subject matter of Tasweer and you read this and you took one day this beautiful picture of a sunset, then you would say, well, I can't put that in my house. Sunset is not animate. It doesn't breathe. So this is going to be what you're going to see as a key element here. So I'm going to define Tasweer classically. The most classical definition of Tasweer in Islamic jurisprudence refers to the act of creating images, representations, or depictions, portrayals of animate beings, particularly humans and animals, anything that can breathe. And this definition is derived from the Arabic root sod, waw, ra, which means to form or shape. So we do not form or shape in photography. What is the intention behind the hanging? It's what we have to look at. Now, by the way, if you go on the computer, you will find lots of more rigid scholars saying absolutely no photography. But I want you to use your brain. I want you to think of Tasweer in terms of the context when it was revealed, and let's examine this with more detail. Does the hanging become a shrine, honor the creation instead of the creator? In its classical sense, Tasweer encompasses various forms of artistic expression, painting, drawing, sculpting, and other means of creating images that depict living creatures. Wood carvings, for example, is another methodology. In traditional Islamic fiqh, law, jurisprudence, tasweer is often associated with the concern, and here's the key, of imitating Allah's creation, as well as the potential risk of such images leading to idols and ultimately idolatry. And by the way, I remember people saying, oh, she was a saint. Someone would be on the wall as I was growing up, an ancestor, and they would say she's a saint. I think that you have to be very careful when you do that. I think you are bordering right there. What does it mean? And what does saint mean to you? So this classical understanding of tasweer primarily revolves around the creation of images that resemble living beings, which has been viewed with caution or outright prohibition, depending on the context and intention behind the creation of such images. So let me try to summarize this. The classical definition of tasweer is the creation of images or forms that depict animate beings, with a particular emphasis on the implication of such creations in relation to Islamic beliefs about the oneness of Allah, Tawheed, and the avoidance of idolatry, shirk. Now remember, the methodology, no matter what you want to study in the Quran, is always to look at the primary source first, the Quran, and then the secondary source, the Ahadith. Now, interestingly enough, the Quran does not explicitly mention the term tasweer or directly address the creation of images, tasweer, of animate beings. It's not a specific verse that says, thou shalt not do tasweer. It's not in the Quran. However, the issue of tasweer has been interpreted from Quranic principles, particularly those related to the oneness of Allah, Tawheed, and the prohibition of shirk. Now, it's interesting because the scholars have divided Tawheed into three areas. Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, the oneness of Allah's lordship; Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, the oneness of Allah's worship; and then Tawheed al-Asma wa Sifat, which is the oneness of Allah's names and attributes. So it is a great sin we can't even name someone Allah's attribute. We could say Abdur Rahman, the servant of the compassionate; Abdur Rahim, the servant of the merciful, beneficent. And there are many, many translations of that word, but we can't actually name him the name of Allah. The primary concern with tasweer in Islamic thought stems from the potential of images, especially of living beings, leading to shirk. Now we know that shirk in Islam is the greatest sin and refers to an act of associating partners with Allah, giving something the potential that only Allah has. Shirk is considered the antithesis of Tawheed, the belief in the oneness of Allah, which is the fundamental concept, the cornerstone of Islam. As a matter of fact, the Quran is divided into three of the highest values in the Quran. It most addresses these things: Tawheed, Tazkiyah, and Imran, the building of a society with faith. So shirk is actually the sin that is unforgivable if a person dies without repenting from it. And I think it's important to know that shirk is divided into two main categories: shirk al-akbar, which is major shirk, and then shirk al-asghar, which is minor shirk. And I want to go into this to help lay this platform. So I appreciate your patience while I'm trying to lay the groundwork for this, what I find to be a very exciting study. So shirk al-akbar, the major shirk, is the most severe form of shirk and involves directing any form of worship, devotion, or divine attribute to other than Allah. And actually, the scholars all say that major shirk is infidelity to Allah, and that it actually takes people out of the fold of Islam. So let's look at some examples of major shirk: idolatry, worshiping idols, statues, or any created being. As a matter of fact, there is a sect among people who call themselves Muslims who actually venerate the shrines at the holy city, and you will find them asking those who are buried in those shrines for help. This is a problem. So polytheism, believing in or worshiping multiple gods. Well, if you're praying to something, then that's like a partner to Allah, because Allah doesn't need anybody for you to pray to. So seeking help or making supplications to beings or things other than Allah. This includes seeking intercession or assistance from saints, angels, or jinn, believing they have the power independent of Allah. So this is one of Allah's sovereignties. No one has this power but Allah. In terms of shirk al-asghar, the minor sins, it doesn't necessarily take a person out of Islam, but it is still a very serious sin and can lead to major shirk if it isn't addressed. So minor shirk involves any action or belief that implies lesser association with Allah. And the examples of that are riya, which is showing off, it's ego stuff, performing acts of worship or charitable deeds to be seen by others rather than for the sake of Allah. So I'm not really worshiping Allah. I'm doing this so everybody sees me. I want people to worship me. I want people to pay attention to me, my ego, my nafs. And then the second example of the minor shirk is believing in certain objects, rituals, or charms that they have the power to bring good or bad luck, independent of Allah's will. So you will find people that have an amulet with a little verse in the Quran in it, and they hang it in their car, and they believe that that has the power to divert any kind of accident for them. We have to be very careful with this stuff. Unless you have an authentic hadith, because that would be singular, or ahadith, plural, then you cannot do these things. These are bid'ah. These are innovations that you want to avoid in the religion. So Islam places this great emphasis on avoiding any kind of shirk by upholding Tawheed, constantly affirming the oneness of Allah in every single aspect of life, educating ourselves, understanding the subtle forms of shirk to avoid falling into them unknowingly, sincere worship, ensuring that all acts of worship from prayer to charity are done purely for the sake of Allah. Now, shirk is not only the opposite of Tawheed, but also an act of injustice towards Allah. How dare we take the credit for something that Allah Azza wa Jal created? So it is an act of injustice toward Allah, and it denies Allah's exclusive right to be worshipped and obeyed. Understanding and avoiding shirk is central to maintaining the purity of faith in Islam. If you want to keep your faith pure, you want to make sure that you understand and know what shirk is and that you avoid it. So in Islam, it is indeed Allah Azza wa Jal's exclusive right to create. Let me say that again because it's very important. It is Allah's exclusive right to create. And I think you'll get this more as I build upon the belief is a fundamental aspect of Tawheed, the oneness of Allah, and it is central to Islamic theology. Now let's talk about the concept of creation in Islam. Number one, Allah is the sole creator. To create means to start with nothing. The Quran repeatedly emphasizes that Allah is the sole creator of everything in the universe. Allah is the one who brings things into existence from nothing, and has the power to give life and cause death. So let's look at the Quran. Remember, we always look at the Quran first. In Surah 39, Az-Zumar, Allah is the creator of all things. Now, if he's the creator of all things, how can I share that with him? How can I created this? No, Allah created everything that you used in that. And then he says, and Allah is over all things, the disposer of affairs. In Surah I.S.L.A.M, and that's Surah 32, verse 4, it is Allah who created the heavens and the earth and whatever is between them in 6 days. Then he established himself above the throne. You have not besides him any protector or any intercessor. So will you not be reminded? So the exclusive power of creation is with Allah Azza wa Jalla. Only Allah has the power to create life, the universe, and everything within it. This power cannot be shared or delegated to any other being, be it a prophet, angel, or any created entity. So we don't see any of the prophets talking about creating anything, except talking about Allah creating something. Any belief that attributes the power of creation to someone or something other than Allah is considered shirk, associating partners with Allah. I have one of Allah's attributes. I can create, not. And remember, this is a grave sin. Human beings, highlight this, bold this, underline this, write it in your notebook. Human beings are creatures, not creators. Human beings are creatures, not creators. While humans can invent, build, or manipulate existing materials, they cannot truly create in the sense that Allah does. Humans use the resources and laws of nature that Allah Azza wa Jalla has created, but they do not possess the power to bring something into existence from nothing. Let's look again at the Quranic perspective. In Surah Al-Arad, Surah 13, verse 16, or have they attributed to Allah partners who created like his creation, so that the creation of each seems similar to them? Say, Allah is the creator of all things, and he is one, the prevailing. So who is the creator of all things? And if I'm trying to share that I created this, then I'm partner with Allah now. I have Allah's power. Creation is actually, mashallah, a sign of Allah's oneness, his unique ability. The act of creation is one of the signs, the ayat of Allah's unique power and divinity. The complexity, order, and harmony in the creation of the universe are seen as evidence of Allah's oneness and Allah's exclusive role as the creator. Reflecting on creation is encouraged in Islam to recognize and affirm the greatness of Allah Azza wa Jal and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's attributes. Now, what are the implications of Allah's exclusive right to create? Number one, the affirmation of Tawheed. Believing that Allah alone is the creator reinforces the concept of Tawheed and strengthens a Muslim's faith in the oneness of Allah and Allah's sovereignty as the creator and originator of all created things. It is also the rejection of shirk, Any belief that attributes the power of creation to others besides Allah is considered shirk. For instance, believing that idols, saints, or other beings have the power to create is a direct violation of the concept of Tawheed. Another implication is gratitude and worship. Recognizing Allah as the sole creator inspires gratitude, reverence, and worship directed exclusively to Allah. It fosters this deep sense of reliance on Allah for all needs and substance, even sustenance. The belief that Allah has the exclusive right to create is a cornerstone of Islamic theology, underscoring Allah's uniqueness, power, and the central role of Tawheed in the Muslim faith. Throughout history and across various cultures, numerous images, statues, and representations have been created and are venerated or worshipped by diverse groups. And I've got, I think, 8 examples, if I remember correctly. Number 1, Buddha. Statues of Buddha are commonly found in Buddhist temples, homes, and public spaces across many Asian countries. And even I've seen many Buddhas in America. These statues depict the Buddha in various postures, each representing various aspects of his teaching and life. In many Buddhist traditions, these statues are not worshipped as gods, but are venerated as representations of the Buddha, serving as focal points for meditation and offering. Number 2, Hindu deities or deities, idols. Hinduism features a vast array of deities, each represented by a statue or image. Common examples include the statues of Lord Ganesha, Lord Shiva, the goddess Lakshmi, and the Lord Vishnu. And if I say any of those correct, we have some Hindu reverts in our family. I would like you to correct me or correct me in the chat, or you can correct me after the class. But I hope I pronounce these correct. These idols are often worshipped in temples. So if you go into their temples, you will actually see elaborate, very extravagant cases where these idols, so to speak, are worshipped and revered, and a place is reserved, a sanctified place, so to speak, is reserved for them. And people come and they put food and flowers and prayers on that item. So if you go into a Hindu's home, you will find their shrine often. There's a nail and pedicure salon here in New Smyrna Beach. They do a really good job. And I went there one day, and as I walked into the store, there was their shrine. As soon as you walk in the store, and you will often see this in restaurants that are owned by Hindus. They'll have a little shrine when you come into the door. Now, number 3 is the cross and statues of Jesus in Christianity. And let me say this, because when Christ returns, he will break the crosses because they are a lie. And this is authentic ahadith. And perhaps when I do another lecture on Jesus, I will share that with you. I didn't think to put it in here. But in Christian tradition, especially within Catholicism and Orthodox Christianity, images of Jesus Christ, which, by the way, is usually painted as a white man, and we know that Jesus was from Philistine, so more than likely, Jesus didn't look like me. The Virgin Mary and various saints are common. You will see pictures of them, even necklaces, amulets with pictures of them. And the crucifix depicting Jesus on the cross is particularly central. And of course, it was a lie because Jesus wasn't crucified. It was someone made to look like him. So while most Christians do not consider these images to be gods themselves, they are venerated as holy figures. In some cases, these images and statues are used in worship, prayer, and as objects of devotion. Number 4 is the ancient Egyptian god statues. Ancient Egyptians created statues and images of their gods, such as Ra, Osiris, Isis, and Anubis. These statues were often placed in temples and tombs. These statues were believed to be the physical embodiment of the gods and were worshipped through rituals, offerings, and prayers. Number 5, images of saints in various religions. In many religious traditions, saints are revered figures are depicted in paintings, icons, and statues. Catholicism venerates images of saints such as St. Peter and St. Francis of Assisi. These images serve as reminders of the saints' virtues and are often used in prayer. Through the Catholic doctrine, worship is directed to God alone, while saints are asked to intercede on behalf of the faithful. If somebody's got to intercede, then that is a partner to Allah. Number 6 is animist totems and statues. In various indigenous and tribal religions, totems and statues represent spirits, ancestors, and natural forces. These can take the form of carved wooden figures, stone statues, or other crafted objects. These objects are often central to religious ceremonies, where they are believed to hold spiritual power or act as intermediaries between the physical world and the spiritual realm. So, an Odinist and Asatru, and I believe it's the Asatru that is mixed with Catholicism in certain regions of the world, and then they add to that some voodoo. This religion was practiced in the Bureau of Prisons, as it is a national body, and we as chaplains were not allowed to touch their deities. They were wrapped in cloth, put in a place for them. There was a combination lock on it, and we had unlocked it. That practitioner would get those things, set it up in the chapel space that we had for them, and then they would put it back. And we would supervise all of that. Number 7, surprise, the Kaaba in Mecca. In pre-Islamic context, before the advent of Islam, the Kaaba in Mecca was surrounded by 360 idols, one for every single day of the year. We're talking about an Islamic year, representing various deities worshipped by the Arabian tribes. And it was like people went there for a Hajj before the pure Hajj. These idols were worshipped by the pre-Islamic Arabs who believed they represented divine powers. The Prophet ﷺ later cleansed the Kaaba of these idols, restoring it as a center of monotheistic worship in Islam. And I will actually be, inshallah, covering a hadith regarding this, building on this in the next class. We will not make it through all the material in this class today, but we will, inshallah, finish it next week. So, number 8, statues of Greek and Roman gods. The ancient Greeks and Romans created numerous statues of their gods, such as Zeus, Athena, Apollo, and Jupiter. Now, by the way, if you had the name Zeus, any of these names, and you became a Muslim, that was the exception for changing your names. Otherwise, it's a bid'ah. You're not allowed. There's nothing in Islam that says change your name unless your name was the name of a god. We know that these Greek and Roman idols, so to speak, are in many places. You often go to a Greek restaurant and they have these statues around. And they were a central figure to religious life, with offerings and rituals performed to honor the gods they represented. And there are even dramas, there are plays, theatric plays written featuring these so-called deities. So these examples that I gave, these 8 examples, illustrate how images and statues can take on significant religious meaning in various cultures, often becoming objects of veneration of worship. Islam strongly emphasizes the prohibition of such practices, encouraging the worship of Allah alone without intermediaries or physical representation. The Quran emphasizes the importance of worshiping Allah alone and not associating partners with Allah. Several verses highlight the dangers of idolatry and the importance of maintaining pure monotheism. And by the way, this was before us, because in Exodus it says, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." And there are many verses in the Bible that support this as well. And I just forgot to put some of them in here. But Allah says in the Injil, "I am a jealous God." Actually, sorry, in the Torah. It also says in the Bible, "Thou shalt not worship any graven images." Thou shalt not worship any graven images. This is by memory. I don't have my verse and chapter with me, but these I know from memory. So in Surah Al-Ikhlas, Surah 112, almost all of us probably know that surah, one of the first ones we learn. Say, He is Allah, who is one. Allah, the eternal refuge. He neither begets nor is born, nor is there to him any equivalent. In Surah Al-An'am, Surah 6, verse 74, and mention, O Muhammad, when Ibrahim A.S.L.A.M. said to his father Azar, "Do you take idols as deities? Indeed, I see you and your people to be in manifest error." He becomes Muslim. He is Muslim. He's a monotheist. And he speaks to his father, who's an idol maker, like this. In Surah Al-Araf, Surah 7, verse 191, do they associate with Allah those who create nothing, and they are themselves created? Powerful verse. These verses, while not directly addressing the creation of images, emphasize the prohibition against associating any partners with Allah and the dangers of idolatry. The concern is that creating images of animate beings could lead to their veneration or idolization, which is strictly forbidden in Islam. And people place great importance, the year of the dog, the year of the rabbit, and they build these animals into their belief systems. And they actually believe they have some power. Because I was born in 58, the year of the dog, then such and such and such and such. What about Qadr? What Allah preordained? So Islamic scholars and ahadith have further clarified the stance of Tasweer with several ahadith from the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, 21 that I have found, explicitly prohibiting the creation of images of living beings. We're not talking about abstract work here. We're talking about the creation of something that breathes. The hadiths emphasize that such practices could lead to shirk or be seen as an attempt to imitate the creation of Allah, which is exclusively belongs to Allah, which is a major sin. While the Quran does not directly address Tasweer, the prohibition is derived from broader Quranic principles concerning monotheism and the rejection of idolatry, supported by the teachings of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in ahadith literature. And this, again, my beloved brothers and sisters, is why if you ever meet a teacher that says, "I only believe in the Quran," run as fast as you possibly can away from them, because they are dangerous to you. Because if we only look to the Quran, we would not understand this. We would miss this massive piece of intellect, spiritual intellect, that we so desperately need for our salvation. In the Quran, where Allah Ta'ala clearly expresses that He is the creator of everything and that there was nothing before him. So let's look to Surah Hadid, Surah 57, verse 3. He, that is Allah Ta'ala, is the first, that is nothing was existing before him, and the last, the apparent and the hidden, and Allah has knowledge of everything. Let's look to Surah Al-Baqarah, Surah 2 and verse 117. Allah Azza wa Jal is the originator of the heavens and the earth. And here we're going to be examining now the word originator. When Allah decides to create or ordain something, he merely says be, and it becomes what he willed. In Surah Al-An'am, Surah 6, verse 101 and 102, Allah Ta'ala is the originator. That's the origin, Allah, of the heavens and the earth. How can he have a son when he has no consort? He has created everything and has knowledge of everything. That is Allah Ta'ala, your Rabb. There is none worthy of worship but him, the creator of everything. Therefore, worship him. He is the guardian over all things, the guardian over all things. In the Arabic language, the word ba'id, translated in the above two verses, it's badi'. Sorry, I said it wrong. I said a different word. In the Arabic language, the word badi', translated in the above two verses as originator, means to create something without any previous existing example. So here is another principle in Tasweer. This constitutes that Allah Azza wa Jal has created everything before which there was nothing except him. Let's look to Surah Yunus, Surah 10, verse 3. To him you shall return after death. Allah's promise is true. He is the one who originates, and we see in the translate, creates the creation. Thereafter, he himself will repeat it, create them again after their death. There are 21 ahadiths on Tasweer, pictures and statues. The Prophet ﷺ said the most severely punished people on the day of judgment will be the picture makers. Remember, this is not the capturing of light. They did not have cameras at that time. Right? Allah's messenger said, those who make these images will be punished on the day of resurrection, and it will be said to them, make alive what you created, what you think you created. And no one will be able to do this. This is a very stern prohibition from making images of that which has a soul. In the field of Islamic jurisprudence, I must mention that there must be consideration in this matter if making a picture is necessitated by urgency or emergency, such as an X-ray for identification of diagnosis of a disease or sickness, such as security measures, a driver's license, passport. In these cases, the conditions is that the picture itself is not the immediate goal or objective. And this is based, my beloved brothers and sisters, on a very famous axiom in Islamic law, Islamic jurisprudence. And it is necessity makes permissible that which is prohibited. So let me give you another example. I'm on an aeroplane, I crash, I land on Gilligan's Island. No one is there, but there was somebody there before me. They left a 6-pack of beer. I'm going to die because nobody's coming to rescue me. And I drink the beer to save my life, or I eat the wild boar. By necessity for life, then it's not prohibited. Okay. Aisha, the wife of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, reported Allah's messenger came back from a journey, and I had screened my door with the curtain having images of winged horses on it. He asked me to remove it. So I pulled it down. And this is in Sahih Muslim. So to create, my beloved brothers and sisters, is to start with nothing. To originate, then I have to start with nothing. Now we can express ourselves on canvases with metal, with wood, but we did not create the mediums with which we work. Did we start with nothing? The term originate and create are closely related, but have different nuances depending on the context. Originate, this means to begin, start, or come into being or existence from a particular source or starting point. It often refers to the point of origin or the source of something where something begins or arises. The term is often used to indicate the root or cause of an event or an idea. So you might hear somebody say, it can imply that something naturally develops or emerges from a source. For example, the idea originated from a discussion we had last week. Here it suggests that the idea had its beginning in the discussion. So we use these words, and it's confusing because in the English language, they mean something quite different than in the Arabic. Create, on the other hand, refers to the act of making or bringing something into existence, often with the implication of innovation or imagination. It places emphasis on the process of making something new that did not exist before. It means to bring something into existence and implies a more active, intentional process where something new is produced or invented by a person or force. So, for example, the artist, this is what we say, created a beautiful painting. Here it emphasizes the action of making or constructing something that did not exist before. But they did not create it, because to create it would mean they'd have to create all the paint, everything that came in the paint, and we don't have that. So I'm going to close with this hadith today, inshallah, and then we will come back and wrap this up in a beautiful way, inshallah, next week. And there are many, many pearls in the class for next week, so I highly encourage you. Actually, it won't be next week because I think we have the potluck. It'll be the following week. Narrated by Ibn Abbas, when the Prophet saw pictures in the Kaaba, he did not enter it till he ordered them to be erased. When he saw the picture of Ibrahim and Ismail, now remember, this is not from a Kodak camera or a Canon camera. Someone had to draw these, sketch these, etch these, whatever. Let me finish the hadith. He did not enter it till he ordered them to be erased. When he saw the pictures of Ibrahim and Ismail carrying the arrows of divination, he said, may Allah curse them, i.e. the Quraysh. By Allah, neither Ibrahim nor Ismail practiced divination by arrows. And this is in Sahih Bukhari. So inshallah, next week, inshallah, we'll pick up again with another narration by Ibn Abbas, and one by Aisha, and several others. We're going to review some more of the actual hadiths that I mentioned. We're going to actually look at a few other things that people have said, and then we will conclude. So, Subhanaka Allahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Transcendent of you, O Allah, and praise be to you as you praise yourself. I bear witness to the fact that there is no deity except you. I seek your forgiveness and I repent to you. So we're going to turn the recording off.